Somebody wanted this dog to be found, but not by just anyone. By me. I said that out loud, even though I was standing alone on the side of Route 47, just outside Ashburn. The morning was quiet, except for the rustling of wind through the trees and the faint buzz of cicadas somewhere in the brush. The beagle sitting patiently by the trunk of the oak tree didn't look mistreated. His coat was clean, nails trimmed, eyes alert. But it was the note that made my stomach turn. The collar was a thick, brown leather one, probably custom-made. I saw the folded scrap of paper tucked under it as soon as I knelt to untie the thin, yellow rope someone had looped around the tree. My fingers hesitated. Something felt off. This wasn't a dog dumped in a moment of desperation. This had been staged, carefully. I glanced at the woods. Nothing. Then back at the dog, who looked up at me with the calm trust of someone who'd already decided I was the right person. I gently pulled the note free and unfolded it. Look inside the locket. He remembers her. You should too. I blinked. Locket? I checked the collar again and noticed a small, heart-shaped pendant hanging next to the tag. I opened it. Inside, there was a tiny photo of a girl, no older than 8, smiling from behind a sunflower taller than she was. That photo should not exist. My name's Nathan Riley. I was a police officer for 25 years in Ashburn. Retired now. I still help the department out from time to time when they get swamped, but mostly I spend my days fishing and pretending to enjoy being out of the loop. But this was pulling me right back into something I thought I'd left buried. I looked again at the photo. I knew that face. It was Ellie Garver, a little girl who went missing 17 years ago. A cold case, a case I'd worked until I couldn't anymore. No leads, no suspects, nothing but a backpack found by the river and a father who swore she must have run away. Only I never believed that, and I sure as heck didn't believe a beagle tied to a tree with her picture around his neck was some random coincidence. I loaded the dog into the back of my truck and drove straight to the station. The receptionist, Paula, looked up with surprise as I pushed through the glass doors. "Morning, Nathan? You bring us coffee or a mystery?" "Mystery," I said, holding up the collar. "And a dog with a better memory than most people." She blinked at the locket. "Is that Ellie Garver?" "Yeah." "Nathan, that case has been closed for over a decade." "No, it hasn't. It's just been sleeping." I got a meeting with the new chief, a younger guy named Derek Madsen. He was respectful, even though he'd only been 12 when Ellie went missing. "You really think this dog's connected to the case?" "Someone went to a lot of trouble to make me think so." "You said the note said he remembers her?" "Yeah." "Could he be her dog? After all these years?" "Not possible. Ellie didn't have a dog, at least not that we knew of." "Then maybe he belonged to someone else involved." "That's what worries me." Chief Madsen agreed to reopen the file. The locket was logged into evidence. The dog, who I decided to call Winston until someone claimed him, was handed over to Animal Services, though I made it clear I'd take him myself if nobody stepped forward. Something about that dog just felt personal. And not just because he was tied up with a message aimed squarely at me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat on my porch with a mug of lukewarm tea and the sound of wind chimes barely filling the space where silence lived. I kept seeing Ellie's smile, that sunflower, the way she used to skip along the sidewalk on her way to school. In the morning, I went back to the tree. Not because I expected to find anything new, but because I had to look. I searched the ground, the tree bark, the surrounding brush. Nothing. No footprints, no cigarette butts, no food wrappers, just a dog's fur pressed into the dirt and the faint scuff marks where he'd sat. But about 5 feet up the trunk, I saw something. A faint scratch. Not from an animal. Too straight. I pulled out my phone and took a picture. Then I noticed more. Faint lines carved into the bark, like someone had used a knife. I made out what looked like initials, L+E, and a date. It was from the year Ellie vanished. Could someone have brought her here back then? Or was it more recent? Back at home, I pulled out the old case file. I still had copies of the major parts: maps, witness statements, photographs, my notes. One entry caught my attention. Local man reports seeing a white van near trail entrance off Route 47 2 days before Ellie vanished. No plates, no follow-up. I had scribbled, "Could be nothing." Next to it, I remember why. We had vans all over town back then. Could have been a delivery guy, could have been a tourist. But now? Now it felt like a breadcrumb. I called Madsen and asked him to pull surveillance or any records of vehicles registered in that area back then. He said he'd try, but warned it might be tough. 17 years was a long time. Meanwhile, I drove back to Animal Services to check on Winston. They said he'd been quiet but well-behaved. The staff liked him. I asked if I could take him for a walk. We went back to the same tree. He sniffed around, tugged a little toward the trail leading into the woods. I let him lead. About 20 feet in, he stopped, stared at a patch of ground, then lay down. I knelt beside him. Nothing jumped out at first. Then I saw it. Half buried in the dirt was a child's hair clip, bright yellow, shaped like a butterfly. "You've been here before, haven't you?" I whispered. Winston looked up at me and wagged his tail just once. Back at the station, the lab confirmed the clip was a match to the ones Ellie was known to wear. A photo even showed her with the same one pinned to her hair. That was enough to move this from coincidence to credible lead. Derek Madsen brought in a few officers to comb the area with cadaver dogs and metal detectors. Nothing else turned up right away, but it was enough to stir old memories in town. I started getting phone calls. People who hadn't talked in years suddenly had theories. A waitress at Mel's diner said she remembered a couple who used to come in with a little girl that looked like Ellie, but always called her Emily. A former janitor at the elementary school said he once saw Ellie talking to a man in a blue jacket just off school grounds, but figured it was a relative. It wasn't solid evidence, but it was something. And the more we dug, the more things started to shift. That night, I kept Winston with me. I laid out a blanket on the floor, but he jumped up on the couch like he owned the place. I didn't have the heart to kick him off. He curled up and watched me while I reread every page of the case file, now with fresh eyes. I thought about the note again. Look inside the locket. He remembers her. You should too. I remembered Ellie's laugh, her sunflower drawing pinned to the board at the station, her mother's tears in the hallway, her father's hollow stare. And how I swore to myself, quietly, privately, that I'd never stop looking. Maybe someone knew that. Maybe that's why they sent Winston to find me. Whatever the case, it wasn't just a mystery anymore. It was personal. And Winston was going to help me solve it. Winston started barking at exactly 3:45 in the morning. I sat up in bed, heart racing. I hadn't heard him bark once since I brought him home. He was always silent, calm, content. This bark was different, urgent, sharp. I slipped on my shoes and hurried to the living room. Winston stood at the front window, his front paws up on the sill, growling low under his breath. I pulled the curtain aside and looked out. A car sat across the street, engine idling. I couldn't see the plates. The headlights were off, but I could make out a shadow inside. Then the car drove off, slowly, like it didn't want to make a sound. Winston turned to look at me. His eyes locked onto mine like he was asking a question I couldn't answer. I spent the rest of the night sitting in the living room, shotgun leaning on the wall beside me, Winston curled by my feet. Whoever had left him near that tree might not be done yet, and if they were watching me, it meant they knew I had the note. They wanted me to find it. But why? At sunrise, I called Madsen and filled him in. He promised to check nearby security cams in case the car passed through town. But I knew better. Whoever this was, they were careful. I brought Winston with me to Mel's diner. The waitress who remembered the couple with the girl named Emily said she'd been thinking more about it since our talk. Her name was Bev, probably mid-60s now, white blonde hair in a tidy bun, apron still starched like she owned the place. "They used to sit in the back booth," she said, pouring me coffee. "Came in maybe 3 or 4 times, always late afternoon. Never once saw them on a weekend." "What made you remember the girl?" She drew, on napkins, always sunflowers, same ones Ellie used to draw. I remember thinking it was sweet, but then the man, her dad, I guess, would always snatch them away and crumple them up. Said drawing was a waste of time. "You remember what he looked like?" She nodded slowly. Tall, white, maybe late 30s back then, wore a blue jacket, not a kind face. Woman with him never spoke. She had a cast on one arm once. I offered to sign it. She flinched. I glanced down at Winston, who sat quietly beside my stool. My fingers itched to pull out the old file. Blue jacket. There it was again. "Do you remember what kind of car they drove?" "White van, rusty bumper." Same as the report from the trail. I jotted it all down and gave her my card. I knew this time she'd be getting a visit from the department. Winston and I headed out. I took a detour past the Garver house. The windows were shuttered. Yard overgrown. It had been empty for years. Ellie's mom moved out a year after the case went cold. Couldn't take it anymore. Her father, Lyle Garver, still owned it, technically, but no one had seen him since he left town around the same time. I parked across the street and got out, Winston at my side. We stood at the rusted gate. I don't know what I was expecting. Maybe a ghost, maybe Ellie herself, but all I saw was a house swallowed by time. The mail slot still had something jammed in it. I pulled it free. A yellowed envelope, weathered but sealed. No name on it, just a sunflower drawn in the center. I hesitated, then opened it. Inside was a short message. "If you remember, go to where she last smiled. She waits." Winston whined softly. "You knew her, didn't you?" I whispered, kneeling to pet him. "Or someone made sure you did." I tried to think. Where had she last smiled? At school? At the diner? The park? But then it hit me. The field behind the church. Every summer sunflowers bloomed wild there, and Ellie used to run through them like it was her own little jungle. I remembered taking a picture for her mom one day, Ellie with a fistful of stems, her nose yellow with pollen. We drove straight there. The field was half dead this time of year, but you could still see the skeletons of last summer's blooms. Winston jumped out of the truck and ran straight toward the old oak tree near the far fence. He circled it, sat down, barked once. I walked over and started looking. Nothing obvious, no fresh soil, no markers. But something was wedged between 2 roots, a small rusted tin box. I pried it loose and opened it. Inside was a flash drive. Back home, I booted up my old laptop. The drive contained a single video file. It was low quality, grainy, time-stamped 17 years ago. I hit play. The footage showed a room. Small. Dim. A girl sat on the floor, playing with a beagle puppy. Her face turned toward the camera. Ellie. No doubt about it. Then a voice, male, deep, said, "She's adjusting well. Keeps asking for her mother, though. Might need to limit her outdoor time." The clip ended. I stared at the screen. I'd never felt colder. This wasn't some random disappearance. Ellie had been taken, kept, hidden, and someone had recorded it like it was a science project. I called Madsen again. He told me to bring it in. I did. That clip changed everything. The station went into full gear, cold case unit reopened the files, FBI was notified. Still, no one knew where Ellie was now, or if she was even alive. That night, Winston refused to sleep. He paced, restless. I watched him and realized he was waiting for something, or someone. Around midnight, he barked at the door, not in fear, like he wanted me to follow. I grabbed my jacket and we headed out. He led me down the road, past the closed shops, past the empty post office, toward the edge of town. Then he turned left into the woods behind the school. We walked for nearly 20 minutes. Then he stopped. There, in a hollow under an old tree, was another box. Wooden, carefully sealed. Inside, a stack of photos. Ellie. Older, 10, 12, 14. With the same dog. Different locations. In some, she was smiling. In others, scared. One had her wearing a school uniform I didn't recognize. A map was tucked into the bottom of the box, marked with a red X. Winston looked up at me. His eyes didn't blink. I knew we were getting closer. Someone had wanted me to find her. Piece by piece. Clue by clue. And Winston? He wasn't just a guide. He was the key. I held on to that thought as we made our way back. The woods felt thicker somehow, like they were leaning in, listening. The pieces were coming together. But something told me we hadn't even scratched the surface yet, and I wasn't sure what we'd find when we did. When I handed the box and photos to Madsen the next morning, his face turned pale. He sat there for a long minute, eyes fixed on the stack of images like he was trying to pull answers from them directly. I told him everything. About Winston leading me to the hollow, about the map, about the red X. He nodded silently and picked up the map. "We'll send a team. You should come with us." I agreed. We drove out in 3 SUVs, 3 officers, 1 search dog, and Winston riding shotgun with me again. The air had that damp chill that clings to your skin and makes you feel like the earth's watching. The red X was marked near an abandoned hunting cabin about 45 minutes outside Ashburn, hidden deep in the woods off a gravel road no one maintained anymore. It didn't take long to find it. The cabin was leaning to one side, roof partially caved in, moss covering the lower half. There were no signs of life, no smoke, no sounds. Still, something felt wrong. Winston jumped out as soon as I opened the door. He ran toward the cabin but stopped a few feet away, nose to the ground, tail low. Madsen signaled the team. Guns drawn, they moved in. Cleared room by room, empty. Dust, rotting furniture, dead bugs and broken glass. Then one of the officers called out, "Back here, basement access, covered by a rug." Madsen and I looked at each other. Then we descended. The basement was musty and small. Cinderblock walls, An old mattress, chains bolted to the floor, a bowl in the corner, and on the wall, a sunflower drawn in chalk. Winston whimpered. I knelt beside him and rubbed his ears. She was here, I said. Madsen crouched beside the chalk drawing. She drew this. Had to be her. No one else would. We took photos, bagged everything, then spread out to search the surrounding area. About 30 yards behind the cabin, we found another shallow pit. This one held a few children's toys, most broken or weather-worn. A torn backpack, a plastic sunflower hairpin. Evidence, yes, but still no Ellie. On the way back to town, Winston kept staring out the window. Not anxious, not tired, just aware. That afternoon, I drove him out to the vet for a checkup. Part of me wondered if he had a chip, if he belonged to someone who could give us a real lead. The vet, Dr. Green, was a quiet man who'd been practicing for over 3 decades. White beard, plaid shirt under his coat, hands like sandpaper. He's healthy, good weight. Teeth say he's about 4, maybe 5. Anything else? Dr. Green ran the scanner along Winston's back. It beeped. He's chipped. My heart jumped. Registered to who? He checked his screen, then frowned. That's strange. Not a name, just a number. And a code. He scribbled it down. 28T7 HJ421. I snapped a picture. Later, back at the station, I had Madsen run it through every database he could access. Nothing standard, he said. But the format, it looks like government, maybe military or research. That night, I sat with Winston on the porch, the stars hidden behind clouds. I held the photo of Ellie in my hands, the one from the locket. I wondered again why they'd sent Winston to me. Why not the chief? Why not Ellie's mother? They wanted me to see something, I murmured. Winston laid his head on my foot. By morning, Madsen had tracked something down. An old research facility about 2 hours east of Ashburn, shut down 12 years ago. The chip code matched a batch registered there. It was a behavior and cognition lab, contracted for military applications, but there's chatter they used animals for long-term memory experiments. And Ellie? No mention of her in the records we can access. But if someone was hiding a child, a place like that might be just the place. We got permission to visit. Madsen brought 2 officers. I brought Winston. The facility was abandoned. Rusted gates, windows broken, graffiti along the walls. Still, something about the place felt preserved, like it had been left in a hurry. Inside, the lab was mostly stripped, papers scattered, equipment broken or looted. But in a side room, we found something. Rows of metal cages, some still with bedding. A few old chew toys. And on one wall, photos. Children. Some faces blurred. One unmistakable. Ellie. She stood with a dog that looked just like a younger Winston, her arm around his neck, sunflower drawn on the wall behind them. Winston barked. Not loud, just one short bark. He stood by a door at the back of the room. We opened it. Inside was a small office, locked filing cabinet. Madsen broke it open with a crowbar. Files, tapes, logs. One folder had Ellie's name. Inside, notes about her adjustment, her behavior. Words like monitor closely and non-compliance increasing. A final note dated 11 years ago. Subject removed from program, reassigned. Memory inhibitor administered. Dog retained for continuity. Reassigned. She's still out there, I said. Somewhere. We took everything, logged it, sent copies to the bureau. Madsen got on the phone with someone higher up. Meanwhile, I took Winston home. He'd done more in a few days than we had in years, but the question burned in my chest. If she'd been reassigned, where was she now? That night, another envelope was in my mailbox. No postmark, just the sunflower. Inside, coordinates, a single word, soon, and a photo of Ellie, not a child, grown, 18, maybe 20, standing beside Winston. She was alive, and someone wanted me to find her. Not yet, but soon. The pieces weren't just coming together anymore. They were moving. The next morning, I didn't go to the police station. I didn't call Madsen either. I just stared at the photo in my hands, the one from the envelope in my mailbox. It didn't make sense. In the photo, Ellie looked like she was around 20. That meant the picture had to be recent. She was standing in front of a building I didn't recognize, red bricks behind her, a small patch of garden at her feet. Winston sat beside her, smaller in the picture, a bit thinner, but it was definitely him. I turned the photo over again. Nothing on the back, just the same coordinates from the note. I opened my laptop, punched them in. The spot was rural, middle of nowhere, tucked between state forest and farmland, about 2 counties west. No roads leading directly to it, just a few logging trails and overgrown dirt paths. Something about it all made my skin itch. Why now? Why give me this photo, these coordinates, and no time frame? Why Winston? Why me? I packed some supplies, flashlight, power bank, first aid kit, a sandwich, a blanket. Loaded Winston into the truck. I left a note at the station for Madsen. Told him I'd found something but didn't say what. If they wanted me to go alone, I wasn't about to ignore that kind of message. Someone had a plan, and whether I liked it or not, I was part of it now. The drive took over 3 hours, most of it through back roads and wooded terrain. I parked when the trail became too rough for my tires and continued on foot. Winston led the way like he'd done this 100 times. After an hour of walking, the trail dipped into a hollow, and there, half hidden beneath the thick canopy of trees, was the building from the photo. Red bricks, ivy climbing the left side. A crooked wooden fence surrounding a narrow yard with weeds taller than my knee. I stopped just outside the gate. Winston didn't bark. He didn't whine. He just stared at the building like it was waiting for him. I pushed open the gate. It groaned, but held. We crossed the yard slowly. The front door had a keypad beside it, but it wasn't locked. I pushed it open. The air inside smelled like dust, and something faintly metallic, not rotten, just old. We stepped into a hallway. No lights, but enough daylight came through broken blinds to see. There were rooms on either side, offices maybe, or bedrooms. I checked them one by one, all empty. Then Winston stopped, stiffened. He looked at a closed door at the far end of the hall. A soft noise came from behind it. Not a person. A low humming sound. Machinery? I reached for the handle, turned it. The door creaked open. Inside was a single room, cleaner than the rest. A computer terminal still powered on, a camera mounted in the corner, and on the far wall, photos, dozens of them. All of Ellie, different ages, different locations. In some, she was smiling. In others, she looked tired. One had her holding Winston's face between her hands, nose to nose. I stepped closer. A noise behind me. I turned fast, hand instinctively going to my sidearm, though I hadn't carried a badge in years. But it wasn't a threat. It was a young man, early 30s maybe, white, glasses slipping down his nose, hands raised halfway in the air. "You're Nathan Riley," he said. "That depends on who's asking." "My name's Colton. I'm the one who sent the letters, the locket, everything." I kept my voice even. "Why?" He looked down at Winston, then at the wall of photos. "Because she trusted you. Ellie. She always talked about you. Said you were the only adult who ever believed her when she told the truth." "Where is she?" "Safe. For now." "That's not an answer." He stepped aside, motioned to a chair. "Please, I'll tell you everything." I stayed standing. "Ellie was part of a trial," he began. "Not at first. She was taken, yes, but not by the people you think. She ended up here after the original place was shut down. I was a student back then. Psychology. Animal behavior. They brought her in with a batch of others. Kids they claimed were orphans or rescued or wards of the state. But it wasn't that. They were trying to teach animals to enhance human memory, to transfer emotional memories through proximity. Using dogs. Yes. Winston was trained to trigger memories in Ellie. Smells, behaviors, routines. The goal was to see if traumatic memory could be stored in a bond and later accessed. It worked better than they ever imagined. And then? She got older, smarter. She started writing down things, names, dates, places. They didn't like that. Said she was becoming a risk. So they drugged her, moved her to a private house, said she had to be reconditioned. But she escaped. Not exactly. I helped her. I couldn't keep watching. He pointed to a filing cabinet in the corner. Those are her journals. Copies. I smuggled them out over months. Everything's in there. Names, faces, every child she remembers. I stared at him. Why now? Why bring me back in? Because I'm scared. I think someone's found her. She's in hiding, but I think they know. The photo, they left that at my door 2 nights ago. I didn't take it. I didn't even know someone had been following me. I glanced at the terminal. What's that for? Remote logs. Every time she checks in, it pings here. Only audio, no video. She won't risk it. Let me hear the last one. He clicked the mouse. A file played. Static. Then a voice. Her voice. Colton, it's me. I'm okay. I saw someone near the ridge yesterday. They didn't come closer, but I'm moving again. Winston's with Riley now, right? That's good. He'll know what to do. He always did. If anything happens to me, he'll take it from here. The file ended. I sat down then. Slowly. Where is she? I honestly don't know. She never tells me. She changes locations every few weeks. But that voice file came from the northwest. Somewhere near Elk Creek. I knew that area. Mountains, dense woods, old mining sites, easy to disappear. I can help find her. Colton looked uneasy. If you go, they'll know. If you start asking questions, looking at maps, poking around, they'll know. Then they've already seen too much. I left with a copy of the journals and Winston trotting beside me. Back home, I started reading. The entries were detailed. Some dated back years. Ellie described names of handlers, layout of buildings, specific routines. She wrote about the other kids, some younger, some older, some who vanished overnight and were never spoken of again. She mentioned Winston often, how he was her anchor, her reminder of who she was before. One entry stood out. Winston remembers places better than I do. If he ever gets lost, he'll find his way back to where it started. He always does. That night, I laid out a map of Elk Creek. Marked every mining site, old cabin, service road. Winston sat beside me, tail thumping. I looked at him. You know where she is, don't you? He wagged once. I wasn't going to wait. Morning couldn't come fast enough. By dawn, I had a plan. I left a second message for Madsen. more detailed this time. Told him what Colton had said, where I was going, and that I didn't expect backup. I didn't trust that there weren't still eyes inside the system. This thing had been buried too deep for too long. Someone had covered tracks that shouldn't have been walkable in the first place. Someone with reach. Winston and I drove northwest, past the foothills of the Eldon Range, into territory where GPS started to drop off and cell signals gave up. I carried printed maps, just like the old days, and I'd marked every mine, trail, ranger cabin, and abandoned ranger tower in the Elk Creek region. It was like looking for a needle in a haystack, but I wasn't alone. Winston would help. We started at the edge of the woods, a Forest Service road barely wide enough for the truck. I parked where 2 game trails crossed and let Winston sniff around, hoping for a sign. He wandered toward the east trail, nose to the ground, tail alert but not frantic. I followed. After 20 minutes, he stopped, turned his head, looked at me like he was waiting. Then he took off. Not a sprint, not panic, just a steady jog with purpose. I followed through thick brush and over shallow creeks, past trees I didn't recognize. The woods here felt older, the kind that kept secrets. Winston led me for nearly 45 minutes before we reached a clearing. In the middle sat a structure half hidden under trees, a mining outpost, or what was left of it. Small cabin, sagging roof, and beside it, a lookout platform crumbling with rot. No sign of life. But Winston walked straight to the door and sat. I drew a breath, knocked once, twice. Nothing. Then, a creak, slow, deliberate. The door opened 3 inches, a voice behind it. "Did he bring you?" "Yes," I said. The door opened fully. She stood there. Older now, but still unmistakably Ellie. Her face had changed, matured, but the eyes were exactly the same. She looked at me, then down at Winston, then back up. "You came!" I nodded, too choked to speak. She opened the door wider, motioned for me to come in. Inside was sparse: cot, a shelf of canned food, a stove. A dog bowl sat beside a water jug. A backpack leaned against the wall. No clutter, nothing unnecessary. A life on the move. Winston circled her once before settling by the cot. She knelt beside him, ran her fingers through his fur, and let out a shaky breath. "I didn't think I'd see either of you again. We've been looking for you. The Bureau is involved now. Colton talked." She nodded. "I know. I had to make sure it was you." I handed her the envelope with the latest messages from Colton and the map I'd marked. She studied it without speaking, then folded it carefully and tucked it in the side of her bag. "They're moving again," she said. "Whoever's behind this, someone else is in charge now. Colton's safe for now, but he doesn't know they've already found him. We can get you out. Witness protection. New identity." She shook her head. "I don't want to disappear. I want to end this." I felt a weight settle in my chest. She wasn't running. She was planning. "I memorized faces, names, badges," she continued. "Not all of them, but enough. And I've hidden copies of the journals in 3 different locations. If anything happens to me, Colton knows where they are." "We can use that?" "Not yet. Not until I know the other kids are safe. Some of them, I don't know where they were sent. But if we flush them out too early, those kids vanish forever." She poured water into Winston's bowl, then sat on the floor beside him. "They made us feel like we were forgotten, like no one cared. But I remembered you. You told me once that truth has a way of finding daylight. I held on to that, even when they tried to take it from me. I didn't know what to say, so I didn't say anything. Outside, the wind rustled the trees. "There's something else," she said after a long silence. "There was a man, not one of the scientists. Someone higher. He only came once a month. Always asked for a report on me personally. But I heard one of them call him something once. Director Linnem." That name rang no bells. I'd never seen it in the case file, never heard it spoken. "Could be a code name," I said, "or someone powerful enough to erase records." She stood, crossed the room, pulled a small notebook from her backpack, handed it to me. "Last year, I started trying to retrace who might have backed the funding. This notebook has every foundation, grant, and research pipeline I could trace with a connection to the original facility. It's not definitive, but it's a start." I flipped through it. Names, charts, footnotes. It read like a paper trail stitched together by someone far too young to carry the weight of a whole cover-up. "You did all this on your own?" "No," she said, looking at Winston. "I had help." That night, I stayed at the outpost, slept on the floor near the door, Winston between us like a sentinel. No one came. In the morning, she handed me a list. 4 names. 3 towns. 1 phrase. "Check the school boards. They hide in plain sight." She wasn't ready to come back with me yet. Said she needed 2 more days to move the journals. Said she'd leave a trail only Winston would know how to follow. I trusted her. I had to. Before I left, she hugged me. Brief, strong. "Thank you for remembering." I didn't answer. Back in the truck, I called Madsen, told him to meet me at the station. I had a lot to share. Winston sat in the passenger seat, ears up, eyes fixed ahead. We weren't done, not by a long shot. I walked into the station just before noon, Winston at my heel, a worn file of handwritten names in my hand. Madsen was waiting by the front desk, arms folded, concern already written all over his face. "You vanished," he said, without needing to raise his voice. "She's alive," I replied, and handed him the notebook. We went straight into the briefing room. I closed the blinds myself. Madsen motioned for coffee, but I waved it off. There wasn't time for slow caffeine today. Ellie gave me 4 names and 3 towns. She said the kids from the original program. They're being hidden in plain sight. School systems, charters, foster networks. Madsen opened the notebook, flipping through pages of hand-drawn organizational charts and funding diagrams. Where did she get all this? Memory, observation. She tracked it all over the years, and I think she's right. You remember how tight-lipped every lead got once the original case was deemed cold? It wasn't silence. It was fear. I pointed to a foundation listed in the notebook. They funneled money into the cognition lab. Their board includes a man named Linnem. Might be a surname. Might be a placeholder. She heard it used once in reference to someone visiting monthly, someone the handlers answered to. Madsen squinted. Linnem. Doesn't come up in any public records, but I can dig. Be careful who you ask. If this reaches the wrong ears, we won't get another chance. Winston lay on the floor quietly, but every few minutes his ears flicked. He was listening as closely as we were. Over the next 4 hours, Madsen and I split the list of towns. He made calls under aliases, requesting school rosters and inquiring about new transfer students from out of state. I scanned open access databases on school board memberships, checking them against the notebook. We didn't expect fireworks, but something popped quickly. In North Arlen, 2 counties away, a new administrator had been hired under unusual conditions. No interview with the press. No background published. A man named Stephen Linnem. I stared at the screen. It couldn't be a coincidence. I told Madsen. He pulled up staff records. Linnem had taken the post just 3 months earlier. but he'd already shuffled placement officers across 3 foster organizations attached to the school's counseling program. It reeked of strategic positioning. "This is a holding town," I said. "They're planting themselves in systems that deal with vulnerable kids." "And if Ellie's right," Madsen said, "some of those kids may have come from the program." He hesitated. "How many people know Ellie's alive?" "Besides you and me, just Colton. And Winston." Winston let out a soft bark, like he heard his name and agreed. That night, I stayed at home, but didn't sleep. I read more of Ellie's copied journal pages. She'd written about the different dogs used in the early years. Winston was special, she said, because he never forgot. Others were trained, conditioned, but Winston had formed real bonds. That's what made the memory retention experiments so powerful and unpredictable. She'd written, "He remembers what I felt, not just what I saw. They tried to replicate it with others, but they never could." I thought about the way Winston had led me, how he seemed to know things before I did. Maybe it wasn't just scent. Maybe something deeper lingered between them. The next morning, I packed the truck again and drove to North Arlen. I didn't tell Madsen I was going. He would have wanted to send officers, and I didn't want to risk spooking anyone. Winston rode shotgun, tongue out the window like he was just another happy traveler. We parked 3 blocks from the district office. I walked in like a consultant, clipboard, button-down shirt, a fake badge on my belt that said, "State Compliance Review." The receptionist was friendly, offered coffee. "No thanks, I just need to meet with Mr. Linham." She frowned. "He's off-site today, usually goes to the academy campus mid-week. He might be at the early youth center." I smiled politely. "I'll check there then, thank you." Back outside, I circled the building. Winston sniffed around the hedges, then stopped at the loading entrance. He whined. "Something familiar?" I waited, but he didn't move, just stared at the door. That afternoon, I followed the receptionist's tip. The academy campus was 5 minutes down the road. It looked normal enough, modern classrooms, outdoor recreation area, nothing unusual. But the youth center behind it? That was different. Low building, minimal signage, high fence. I drove around once, parked in the back lot, waited. 2 hours later, a silver SUV pulled in. Linham stepped out. He was white, tall, well-groomed, mid-50s maybe, and carried himself like a man who didn't fear interruption. I recognized the confidence from old days interrogating mid-level commanders, the kind of guy used to being protected by layers of other people's silence. He walked inside. I waited 10 minutes, then took Winston out and walked to the front. The receptionist looked up. "Can I help you?" "Yes," I said. "I need to speak with Stephen Linham about a placement inquiry." "Do you have an appointment?" "Not officially. I'm following up on a student listed as a special education transfer. A girl. Moved here from private care. Her file flagged inconsistencies." She hesitated. "Let me check if he's available." She walked off. Winston sniffed the air, then pulled gently toward a hallway to the left. I followed. The receptionist hadn't returned. We passed 2 doors, both locked. The third wasn't. It opened into a records room, shelves lined with binders, cardboard boxes stacked in the corner. I pulled one. Inside, placement logs, photos, travel records. I flipped through. Faces, notes. Some scribbled in red ink. Unstable, too vocal, reassigned. One file had a photo of Ellie at age 9, labeled only Subject 6. I snapped photos with my phone, grabbed one folder to bring back, then heard footsteps. I shut the cabinet. Winston growled softly. We slipped out, back through the side hall, just as the receptionist rounded the front desk again. "He's not available right now," she said, trying to hide a frown. "I'll follow up next week, thanks." We left without running. You never run unless you want to be chased. In the truck, I looked at the folder. It listed 3 student names, all under watch directive. One had recently missed several weeks of class with no listed illness. The notes referenced behavior mimicking Subject 6. I didn't know what that meant exactly, but I knew who Subject 6 was, and they were still using her as a benchmark. That meant they hadn't let go. Back home, I gave everything to Madsen. He ran the names through state records. One of them, a boy named Kyle, had been in and out of foster care since age 5. No known biological family. No birth certificate until age 6. That didn't happen by accident. "We're sitting on something big," Madsen said, "but we're still missing the match to tie it all together." "Ellie's ready to surface. 2 more days. She said she'd lead Winston back when the journals are safe. Once she does, we go public." He looked at me. "Are you sure she'll be safe?" I nodded. "She's been planning this longer than we've been trying to catch up." That night I stood on my porch, Winston at my side. The wind smelled like coming rain. We were closer than ever, but I had a feeling the real storm hadn't even started yet. The wind picked up sometime past midnight. Winston stirred by the door, head lifting before mine did. I was already half awake, tension folded behind my eyes like a second skin. I'd been sleeping lighter ever since Ellie reappeared. I sat up slowly, listened. Nothing unusual at first. No car, no footsteps. But Winston stayed alert. Still. Then came the sound I hadn't heard in years, soft static over a frequency radio. I'd left the old shortwave set up near the back shed, powered down for weeks. But now it was on. I grabbed my coat and flashlight, barefoot on damp grass, Winston a silent shadow beside me. The static grew louder as I neared the shed. When I opened the door, the radio sputtered, and then I heard it. "Tell him. 2 hours, the River Road. He'll know." I froze. The voice faded. It was Ellie. She had found a way to broadcast a signal directly. Must have used a remote transponder, something low range but effective. Clever. Risky. She wasn't waiting anymore. 2 hours. River Road. I looked at Winston. He didn't wag his tail. Just stared up at me. We left 10 minutes later. The truck moved fast over back roads. I knew the River Road she meant. An old service route near the bend of Lake Ormond, 20 miles east. Hardly used since the dam construction a decade ago. Quiet, secluded, surrounded by woods and water. Perfect for a meeting. Or an ambush. We parked near mile marker 12. Winston jumped out first, nose to the wind. The river wasn't far. I checked my watch. Still 20 minutes early. But she'd be early too. I knew it. We followed the trail down. Mist floated off the water. The moon cast a silver sheen across the river's bend. Winston led me around a narrow rock curve. Then he stopped. And there she was. Ellie stepped out from behind a fallen tree. Hood pulled low, backpack slung across one shoulder, boots scuffed with travel. She didn't smile, but her eyes softened when she saw Winston. He trotted up and rubbed against her leg. "You heard me," she said. "Of course I did." "You said 2 days." "Plans changed." She knelt beside Winston and pressed her forehead to his. "It's all in here," she said, pulling a thick envelope from her pack. "The last journal, backup drives, thumbprints, one full list, every child I could find. Some are still missing, but this is everything I have." I took it carefully, sealed, wrapped in plastic, heavy. "You have to get it to someone who can't be reached. A judge, a civilian review. You can't go through anyone local." "Understood. Where will you go?" "I have one last stop. Then I disappear for good. I've given everything. I've done what I can." I didn't try to argue. I could see it in her eyes. She'd spent years preparing for this moment. But then something shifted. Winston growled. A faint crack in the brush behind us. Ellie stood quickly. I turned, hand reaching instinctively to my side. We were being watched. She hissed, "They found me. Go, now!" She didn't hesitate. Slipped into the trees across the path, fast and quiet. Winston stayed by my side, tail stiff, ears up. Another crack. Then a figure. White male, early 40s, lean frame, black windbreaker. He stepped into view like he owned the night. "Mr. Riley," he said calmly. I said nothing. "You've been a busy man. This is not your game anymore. Walk away." "Not without her." He smiled slightly. "She's not your concern. We'll handle the asset." Winston barked, one sharp warning. "You want a leash on her memory? You're too late," I said. "She's already spoken. She's documented everything. Even you." His face twitched, just once. "You've made a mistake." I stepped forward. "You followed us here. That means you're exposed. You know what happens when light hits mold?" He took a breath, reached for his pocket. Winston lunged before I could move, teeth clamped down on the man's arm. He howled. I tackled him, drove him into the dirt. His hand clutched a stun device, not a gun. Close call. Winston released on command. I held the man pinned. "Who sent you? You're in over your head, old man. Try me." He gritted his teeth, but didn't answer. By the time I finished zip-tying his wrists with the cord from my backpack, Ellie was gone. Winston and I dragged the man to the truck. I knew better than to bring him to the station. Instead, we headed to Madsen's safe house, a backup cabin used during deep cover operations. He met us at the back road, eyes wide as I shoved the man into a chair and handed him the file. "They know. They're watching the girl. Maybe Colton too. You need to move fast." Madsen opened the envelope. His hands didn't tremble, but his jaw tightened with every page. This is more than I expected. Names, codes, deposits. You have to go wide. Media, civilian court. We need pressure, not procedure. The man in the chair smirked. "You won't make it public. You won't risk her." "Watch us," Madsen said. By sunrise, we had copied the files 3 times, uploaded them onto secure drives, and dispatched them to 3 different locations. Madsen contacted a federal contact in another state, someone outside the usual chain. I stayed off-grid at the safe house with Winston. We rotated the man between cuffs and questioning, but he gave up nothing useful. He didn't need to. The files said enough. Later that afternoon, we received word. One of the names Ellie had flagged, a doctor tied to the original facility, was arrested trying to board a private jet. Another administrator had gone missing. A journalist had picked up the story from an anonymous tip, Colton, no doubt, and run with it. Winston sat by the door, head on his paws, waiting. He didn't know it, but the ripples had started. The stone had hit the water, and the circles were spreading. Winston stirred before I did. He always did. I sat up slowly in the creaky wooden chair, still inside the safe house, and rubbed the back of my neck. The man we'd detained the night before was still in the adjacent room, tied and guarded in shifts by 2 off-duty state officers Madsen had trusted since day 1. Winston had moved to the window. His ears were up, but his body language was calm. like he sensed movement in the air, but not danger. I followed his gaze. Outside, the sky was an iron gray, streaked with low clouds and quiet light. There was something about the stillness of that hour, like the world hadn't decided what kind of day it was going to be. I poured a half cup of coffee from the carafe Madsen had left on the stove. Lukewarm, but it did the job. I ran a hand over Winston's back and opened the side door, letting him out onto the porch to stretch. He trotted down to the dirt path, nose twitching. Behind me, the radio crackled. Not the shortwave. This was the secure police band. Madsen's voice came through. "Riley, you up?" "Barely. What's the update?" "One of the names from Ellie's final list just got flagged trying to cross state lines. Foster transport vehicle, but no kid in the system. We picked him up in Baldwin. Guy used a fake credential ID, but it matched the format Ellie logged in her journal." "You think he's part of the relocation network?" "I think he's one of the movers, the ones who made sure certain kids never surfaced again. He lawyered up the moment we brought him in, but we've already got enough for a hold. His phone pinged in the same town as a missing girl from 6 years ago." I leaned against the doorframe. "How soon before someone tries to pull him out?" "Probably already working on it, but the story Colton leaked hit 3 independent blogs last night. By noon, it'll be national. They can't clean it all up anymore." I glanced at Winston, now sitting at the bottom of the porch steps, facing the woods. "We've got the man who tried to take her last night in the other room." "Has he talked yet?" "Only enough to show he knows exactly who Ellie is, but he thinks we won't go public with any of this. That's his weak spot." Madsen paused. "What about Ellie?" "No word yet." "You think she's still on the move?" "She's doing exactly what she said she would, disappearing on her own terms." We ended the call, and I stepped outside. Winston turned to look at me, then back at the woods. I followed his eyes, scanning the dense line of trees. Then, in the distance, movement. Not fast, not hidden, just quiet. A man emerged. Not the one from before. This one was older, civilian clothes, no weapon visible. He walked with purpose, but not menace. And he was alone. I stepped down beside Winston. The man stopped at the edge of the clearing and raised his hands. "I'm not here to fight. My name is Malcolm Breen. I used to be part of the advisory board for the cognition program." I didn't say anything. Neither did Winston. "You've stirred something, Mr. Riley, and I think it's time someone on the inside talked." I motioned toward the porch. He walked slowly, cautiously, like he knew the rules had changed. Inside, over coffee, he began. There were 10 children in the original phase. Only 6 made it past the first 2 years. Ellie was number 6. She wasn't supposed to be there. Her transfer papers were forged after the first girl died. They needed to keep the data flow balanced, so they filled her bed. But she wasn't like the others. She noticed things. She remembered patterns. She talked to the animals like they were people. He looked at Winston. They called him Echo 1. Not Winston. The idea was to imprint consistent emotional triggers from early age, then suppress those memories and try to recover them through association. I shook my head slowly. They turned kids into test loops. They believed they were helping the military prepare for future combat trauma. What they really did was break 6 children in ways no adult ever recovered from. Why come forward now? Because I followed the files. I watched her. Ellie. She's the only one who kept going. The rest are either lost or institutionalized. I read her notes once, when she was 14. She wrote that if anyone ever came looking, she'd make sure they knew where to find the bones. That scared them. Scared me. He handed me a flash drive. It's encrypted, but it has the data backups. I smuggled them out years ago. I've been hiding them ever since. Names, transfer records, payments. enough to take down half the board. I took it. Why trust me? Because Winston's still with you. If she trusted you enough to give him back, that's good enough for me. We brought Madsen in that afternoon. Malcolm sat for a full deposition, the kind that wouldn't hold in court without backup, but would blow a jury's mind once validated. We recorded everything, filed 3 secure uploads, and then we called in the press. Not one source. 4, each with different pieces. By midnight, they all had the same headline. Program 6 exposed. Child memory experiments linked to government contractors. We waited. Winston paced for a while, then settled in the hallway, watching the door like he was guarding more than just me. Around 3 a.m., Madsen got the call. Federal investigators were on site at 2 separate facilities tied to the Foundation. They found the remains of what was left of the training rooms, files half-burned, names on rosters. More calls came in. Lawyers, whistleblowers, families. And then, finally, Colton. She called, he said. Ellie's okay. She saw the story. She knows. She said to tell Winston she'll find him when it's over. I repeated the words out loud. Winston wagged his tail once. The wind had changed again. We weren't finished yet, but now the world was finally watching. The day after the story broke, the town felt like it was holding its breath. Not just Ashburn, but the entire stretch of counties surrounding it. Phones rang non-stop at the station. Reporters, lawyers, families, old classmates who remembered a girl who vanished one summer and never came back. Even the mayor showed up at Madsen's office, pacing nervously and pretending not to know why there were 3 black SUVs parked discreetly outside City Hall. I stayed mostly silent through it all. I wasn't interested in who was pretending they didn't know. I cared about the ones who had always known and said nothing. Winston and I kept to our routines. We walked the old trail behind my property, the same one where I'd found the rusted tin box Ellie had hidden between tree roots. I thought of her often, the way she'd whispered into the radio, the way she vanished into the trees. She was still out there, keeping her promise to stay hidden until the dust settled. Part of me hoped she'd change her mind, but the other part knew she wouldn't. Madsen called me into the station 2 days after Malcolm's deposition. We met in the back records room, away from the noise. He handed me a manila folder. New name came up, he said. One we didn't expect. I opened the folder. It was a photo of a man. Clean cut, glasses, white shirt with a tie knotted tight. A teacher. This guy was flagged during a review of staff employment records at the Red Creek Academy. He worked there for 3 years. Ellie mentioned him once, called him Mr. Kenton, the quiet one. But we just got confirmation. His real name is Joseph Reed, former logistics tech for the original program. Switched identities after the program went dark. Why teach? To stay close. Maybe to keep an eye on the kids. Maybe to finish what he started. He went off-grid last week, right after the story aired. I closed the folder. You think he's hunting her? I think he's looking for something she hasn't made public yet, something even we haven't seen. The original control protocols. Madsen nodded. Malcolm said there was a second layer, a private logbook kept by the head technician, not digitized, handwritten only. Supposedly it outlined everything, including test termination schedules. I glanced at Winston. He hadn't moved, but his eyes were locked on me. Where was it stored? Malcolm said there was a storage facility in Morris Hollow, 90 miles west. Paid in cash, untraceable. Rented under a shell name for 17 years. And now? Empty. Cleared out 3 days ago. Then Reed's got it. Or he's looking for it too. We were running out of unknowns. Later that day, Colton contacted me through the encrypted line we'd set up. His voice was tense. I think they're trying to bait her out. Someone's impersonating you online. There's a message on one of the old forums she used to visit, signed with your name, referencing the River Road and Winston. She'll know it's not me. That's not the point. It's a test. They're looking to see if she's watching. If she responds, they'll triangulate the source. I felt a chill creep into my chest. Delete it. Purge the forum. Block the source. Already on it. But Riley, they're adapting. This isn't just damage control anymore. They're scared. Good. Let them be. That evening, Madsen got word that another subject from the original program had been found. Alive. A young man named Daniel, living in a group home in rural Tennessee. Severe memory loss, frequent seizures. But when shown a picture of Ellie, he cried. Not words, just tears. It gave me hope and more urgency. Back at home, I scanned through the encrypted flash drive Malcolm had given me. Most of it was in code, but I recognized some of the patterns Ellie had marked in her journals. Names cross-referenced with code groups. Handlers identified by number, later matched to aliases. Then, I saw something. A file titled Echo Log 6, Confidential. I opened it. It was a scan of handwritten notes. Neat. Clinical. It listed Winston's identification number, behaviors, imprinting patterns. One line was underlined. Subject displays abnormal attachment resilience. Emotional memory persistence exceeds model predictions by 300%. And another, if Subject 6 becomes unpredictable, initiate contingency recall through animal trigger sequence. Handler must engage original loop. Key phrase, bring her back to summer. I stared at the page. They'd built a fail-safe. If they wanted to break her mentally, all they had to do was repeat that phrase around Winston. The bond they thought they could control. Only she'd never told me that. I picked up the phone, called Madsen. We found the trigger phrase. It's in the logs. If Reed gets close to her and he says it, she might shut down. Or worse. We need to find her first. We won't. She'll find us. That night, I left the front door open. Just a crack. At 3:14 a.m., Winston barked once. I opened my eyes. She was standing in the doorway, Ellie, older, thinner, but standing. She didn't speak right away, just crossed the threshold, knelt beside Winston, and pressed her cheek to his head. They're calling me out, she whispered. I can feel it. Every move, every leak, every quiet question on the forums, they want me back in their hands. They won't get you. They already have the phrase. I saw it online before it was pulled. They'll try to use him, try to turn him into a trigger. They won't. She pulled out a notebook from her coat, smaller than the last one, just a few pages. This is the last of it. The handlers who were never on the payroll, the names who worked off books. They were ghosts even back then. If anything happens to me, make sure they're not forgotten. I took it, hands shaking. I'm not going anywhere, I said. Neither am I, she whispered. But we'll have to move fast. Reed's watching, and he's not working alone anymore. She leaned back, glanced around my cabin like it was the first real home she'd seen in years. Can Winston stay here a while? Just until I figure out the next step? Of course. Winston curled beside her, tail thumping softly. Outside, a car passed on the highway. Neither of us moved. We knew someone was coming, but this time we weren't running. We were ready. Ellie stayed hidden for another 2 nights. She slept in my spare room with the door unlocked, but always slightly ajar. Winston posted like a statue in the hallway, ears twitching even in sleep. I made sure the blinds stayed down, the porch light off. It felt like we were waiting for a knock we both knew would come. Each day, I went back to the safe house to check on Madsen and the federal agents who'd finally been cleared to operate openly. The man we'd captured, the one who'd tried to ambush us at the river, Still wasn't talking, but he wasn't trying to escape either. He just watched. Listening. Always listening. On the third morning, we got confirmation from DC. Joseph Reed was on the move again. A black SUV matching his description had been picked up on a wildlife camera 3 miles from Ashburn's Edge. That wasn't a coincidence. And it wasn't a bluff. He was coming for Ellie. We didn't know what he wanted exactly, whether it was to silence her, extract her, or bait out the final pieces of the program's secrets. But he was coming prepared. He wouldn't come alone. That night, I brought Ellie to the safe house. The feds agreed to station 2 agents inside, both vetted, both known quantities. Madsen was running point, calm under pressure, but tense in the eyes. The house was quiet. I parked the truck out back and checked the grounds twice before locking the door behind us. Winston followed Ellie from room to room, never straying far. Around midnight it happened. The first sound was a single car door shutting, soft, distant, but definite. Then came the crunch of footsteps over gravel. The porch groaned. Madsen was by the front door in a flash, gun drawn. The 2 agents flanked the windows. I pulled Ellie into the kitchen and slid the hidden panel open behind the cabinet. It wasn't a panic room, just a space. A wall cavity wide enough for 1 person to crouch. Soundproofed, concealed. We had agreed ahead of time she'd go in if it came to this. She didn't argue. Winston stayed by the door. She looked at him and whispered, "Stay," her hand on his back. He stayed. I closed the panel. Moments later, the knock came. Not urgent, just deliberate. I stepped into the front room. Madsen motioned for silence. Another knock. Then a voice. "Mr. Riley, no more games. I just want to talk." Reed. Madsen moved toward the door. I shook my head and stepped forward. He lowered his weapon by an inch. I opened the door. Reed stood on the porch in a navy coat, clean-shaven, hands visible. But his eyes were hunting. He smiled thinly. "You don't look surprised to see me." "I'm not. You've made quite a mess. Headlines, depositions, missing children suddenly remembered. They were never forgotten." He exhaled through his nose. "We can end this without blood. She comes with me. The data dies with me. You walk away with your retirement intact." "Is that what you told the others?" I gave them peace. Behind me, I could hear Madsen's breath tighten. The agents hadn't moved. "You're not getting her," I said. He smiled again. "I don't need to. She'll come out on her own." Then he looked down at Winston. "Bring her back to Summer." The phrase. The fail-safe. Winston flinched. His ears fell. His body went still. Reed took a step forward. "Bring her back to Summer." Winston let out a low growl. Then something happened. He didn't freeze. He didn't fall into some conditioned behavior. He lunged. Reed stumbled backward as Winston's teeth sank into his sleeve, dragging him to the porch floor. I stepped forward and kicked the stun baton from his hand as he reached for it. Madsen and the agents swarmed in. Reed was pinned in seconds. "I said the words," he muttered. "I said them." But Winston wasn't the same dog they trained. He hadn't forgotten. He had chosen. We arrested Reed on sight. The feds had enough now. Attempted abduction, decades of abuse, orchestrated disappearances. He was done. When the door finally closed and the cuffs were locked, I opened the wall panel. Ellie stepped out, her face blank at first. Then she saw Winston. He trotted to her, laid his head on her feet. And she smiled. 3 days later, Ellie testified in front of a closed federal committee. She wore civilian clothes, simple and clean, her voice steady. The courtroom was sealed. No press. No public. But justice doesn't always need an audience. Madsen sat beside me on the bench. When Ellie finished, she walked straight to Winston and scratched behind his ears. "You saved me again," she said. That night, she left Ashburn for the last time. No one saw where she went. Not even me. She left a note on my kitchen table. "You kept your promise. I'll never forget." The morning after she left, Winston didn't bark, didn't pace. He just sat on the porch and watched the horizon, and I sat beside him. We were quiet for a long time. The world wasn't fixed, but it was finally honest. And that was a start.